Okay, so the session 1 that we have is designing mathematics lessons in the new normal. But before we go with how to design mathematics lessons in the new normal, we just need to go back first on the things that we have in the face-to-face one. What are the things that we consider in designing lessons? So I have here some considerations in designing lessons. One is the learning theories or concepts. Before we do our lessons, we usually try to go over with theories that can help us conceptualize our lessons. And then we try to make use of teaching approach or teaching strategy or an instructional model that is based on the theory that we selected. Like, for example, we want to make use of inquiry-based learning. We want to make use of inquiry-based learning as our anchorage. So we have an inquiry-based approach in doing that. The strategy maybe is we will be making use of mga strategies nga naa sa inquiry-based. You can have experiential, no? Okay, inquiry-based mo po na siyang experiential. Or you can have other strategy. But on the instructional model, you will really have pwede ka 5 E's or 7 E's, no? Katong mga explore, engage, muto yung mga models. So it's either kung na kay theory, pwede ka magamit og model, katong mga 4 A's. 4 A's is also a model, no? Instructional model. Or pwede ka magamit og strategies, pwede po ka magamit og approach. What's the difference between approach, strategy, and model? So ang approach is mas bugat siya, murag siya ang umbrella. Like you can have a cognitivist approach in teaching mathematics, or you can have a behaviorist approach. For the strategy, you can look for a strategy like if you want to have a reflective approach in teaching mathematics, you can make use of self-regulated learning strategy, no? Right nga na. And then your model will be the forethought, katong mga phases, may forethought, na ay katong implementation, na rin ka na mga reflection, something like that. And then you can also look into the learning standards and the competencies, as well as the constructive alignment. So I have here some of the things, muli mga theories, no? The most common learning theories that we have the behaviorism. It's more on the stimuli and response. So we know Pavlov, we know kakisba to na ibaw Pavlov, Skinner, kana sila mga behaviorist sila, kay kanang action reaction bitaw. So we also have cognitivist, katong more on the brain gani ang ilang karan-aon, more on memory. Naapod tayo constructivism like Vygotsky, Piaget. You can also have Brunner. They are more on constructivism. The learner is able to construct their own meanings. So in the slide, I think I have here some focus. Like for behaviorism, the focus is what the learner does. So the response is observable. For cognitivism, it's more on processing information and then how the learner organizes new information. And then for constructivism, it's more on how the learner interprets new information and apply it in their own. So in behaviorism, the learner is reactive. So naibuhaton si teacher, dayon mag-react din siya. Sa cognitivism, it's proactive. It's more on the thinking. And then also of constructivism, ang learner ang mag-think man ani. But on the type of learning, for behaviorism, it's more on basic definitions and explanation of concepts, and then generalization and recall. For cognitivism, it's more on higher order reasoning, mga higher order thinking, no? And then it's more on memorization and organization. For constructivism, it's more on critical analysis, no? And then real life situations kaayo yung focus. For example, sa behaviorism, ang pwede buhaton sa teacher, maghatag siya mga pre-test, comprehension checks. She could also facilitate learning through assessments and then repetition. Usually, kanami itong kabuhaton na itong drills, di ba maghatag drills every now and then. It's really anchored sa behaviorism. Kana maghatag drills sa class, no? Especially sa mathematics. Kana po mga practice tests. For cognitivism, usually maghatag ta og feedback, magpa-activity ta og kanang mag-ask ta og metaphor sa mga students, mga analogy. We ask them to do concept map and then remove irrelevant information. That's anchored of the cognitivist approach. But if we have kanang constructivism, usually we ask them to do collaborative learning. We ask them to apply new knowledge in different contexts and perspectives. So more on application and constructivism. Do you have some questions on this, or it's clear, no? So more on repetition sa mathematics, mga drills, that's behaviorist. More on memorization, mga concept mapping, mga analogy of metaphor, that's cognitivist. But more on the students are doing collaborative learning, they do it in their own, that's constructivism. So here are some of the activities that, but also naibag-o karon, usually bag-o ako nakuha sa ang connectivism. With the onset of technology, no, kanang sa internet, the learner is self-directed learning. Kani karon, the one that we have now, nga kani bitong self-directed ang learning, we are anchoring it in the theory of connectivism, connection. We need to connect to our learners through technology. Kana siya. So for behaviorism, some of the methods that we could use is the lecture, the drill and practice. We can have multiple choice. That's behaviorism. For cognitivism, we could have lecture also, visual maps, multiple choice, and essay assessment, or memorization of learning. For constructivism, we have discovery approach, collaborative group work, scaffolding, self-guided learning, and peer grading. I think much of the things that we do in the classroom now is on the constructivist approach, right? But that's on the face-to-face. But now that we are into the pandemic and we have less interaction with our students, our learning theory that we are into now is into connectivism. It's more on self-directed, and then we share content and sources, and then there are spontaneous learning groups, and we create knowledge collaboratively. I got this from the internet. Humans have always been connectivist. We become dependent on technology, and we recognize as the role of the internet. Just as we've been with behaviorism, we subject things to stimuli, and we have had a need for and found enjoyment in acquiring and memorized facts. That's cognitivism, and have always sought out their own means in creating meaning on the world. That's constructivism. So the thing that we do is in behaviorism, it's more on response to the stimuli. Like we are given incentives, no, that we get good grades for doing this, something like that. Or also in cognitivism, we are more on acquiring knowledge and memorizing things and learning a lot, no, using our memory. And then constructivism, we do it our own. As we progress in the educational arena, I think before in the previous 1900s, we are really more on behaviorism and constructivism and cognitivism. We really anchor the teaching and learning with Pavlov, with kanang cognitivist would know more on the memory. We also look into the tabula rasa, something like that. But as we go with the 20th century, we are now in the constructivism, more constructivist not ang atong classrooms. But as we consider this pandemic, we are now into the connectivism na po dayon, no? That's how we go with our learning theories as of the moment. I'll be sharing some of the things. I made a module, and I have here some of the things that I've done for the extension that we have. One is, if you know Kolb's, no? Kaning kuani Kolb's. Wait. Kolb's theory, kaning sa experiential learning ni Kolb's. So, it starts with concrete experience and then reflective observation. We also have abstract conceptualization and then active experimentation. So with that in mind, kuan siya, kanang ang atong teaching and learning, pwede na to gamiton ani, like if we do lessons, you could, during the lesson, you can start already with a concrete experience. And then we can anchor this into the 4 A's. Like we can consider the concrete experience as the activity part. We can consider the reflective observation as the analysis part. We can consider the abstract conceptualization as the abstraction part. And we can consider the active experimentation as the application part. So we can give an activity first. So we have Kolb's theory, and then we make use of the 4 A's as our instructional model. And then we can incorporate already the 21st century skills. Like for the activity, you can have collaboration. For the analysis, you can have communication. For the abstraction, you can have, maybe for analysis, you can have critical thinking. For abstraction, you can have communication. For the application, you can have creativity. No? Pwede naman siya masulod dira. Also, we can also have the inquiry-based learning. Inquiry-based learning is usually anchored on Dewey, Piaget, and Vygotsky. So you can have the 5 E's for that. So we can make use of the 5 E's instructional model as our inquiry-based learning instructional model. You can start with engage before the lesson, but during the lesson, you can ask them to explore, explain, and elaborate. And then after the lesson, you can ask them to evaluate. No? Don't worry, I'll be giving you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. Also, Brunner. You also know the 3 modes of representation of Brunner. You start with an inactive stage. This is the concrete stage. We teach students using manipulatives in mathematics. And then the next stage, we have iconic stage. This is the pictorial stage. So we, after asking the students to make use of manipulatives, we give them activities that we ask them to draw things, no? Like we ask them to draw sets, something like that. Or we ask them to draw integers. Pero dili pa siya numerical in nature, but it's pictorial sa siya. Like 1 apple plus 1 orange in an illustration type equals something like that. Or in the symbolic stage, you can already have 1 plus 2 equals something like that. So that's the abstract phase. So in teaching mathematics, usually we make use of this. We start with manipulatives, then we continue with having it pictorials, and then after that, we go with the numerical one. We also have the self-regulated learning of Zimmerman. So you can start with the 4-thought phase. It's on preparation. You ask yourselves, what are the things that I need to do, something like that. So you try to go over with the things that you know and what you don't know. And in the performance phase, you try to implement it. You try to do it if you can do it or not. And then if in the reflection phase, you try to check if what's missing, what's wrong with what you are doing, why you cannot do it perfectly, or what are the things that made you do it successfully, something like that. So you can have this as some of the things that you can make use in your classroom. I would like to highlight on the learning competency as well as the constructive alignment. So in the learning competency, you have learning competency. With that competency, you can chunk it into objectives. But on the objectives, you need to have a cognitive one, a psychomotor one, and an affective one. Maybe to represent knowledge, skills, and values, our KSV, no? Maybe we can put the competency as 1 pineapple and the objectives as the chunks. So I have here a picture of constructive alignment. You start with the curriculum guide. You look into the content standard, the performance standard, and the competencies. No, the content standard is more on what students should know. The performance standards in what students should do. And then the learning object outcomes or objectives should be SMART. What is SMART? It is specific, measurable, attainable, result-oriented, and then time-bounded. And then the learning activities, usually the formative assessment that we have, and then the assessment task, the summative assessment. Naapa ba ko? Sorry, I cannot see your faces. Maybe you can tell me if I can still be heard.
Yes, sir. Okay,
Okay.
sir.
Sorry ha kay akong screen, ako lang yung PowerPoint ako makitaan. So I cannot really sige. I have here the example. I really love to give this example because it's in Filipino, not mathematics. Gusto na ko nga sa inyo gikan ang sa mathematics nga side muna nga akong example ang other nga area. Like we have here an example most essential learning competency in Filipino na sasagot ang mga tanong na binasa o napakinggang tala-arawan, journal at anekdota. So we have here the objectives, the teacher's objectives based on the most essential learning competency. Nasasagot ang mga katanungan sa nabasang journal o tala-arawan. Nakakasulat ng sariling tala-arawan or journal na ibabahagi sa iba ang mga mabubuting gawain at karanasan sa pamamagitan ng tala-arawan. Do you think the objectives are correct? What do you think? The competency is nasasagot ang mga tanong sa binasa o napakinggang tala-arawan, journal at anekdota. The first is on knowledge. Is the manner the first objective knowledge-based? Knowledge ba ang pagkasulat? Dili, no? It's behavioral kaayo ang pagka-state sa first objective. So, it's not knowledge really. And then the second is nakakasulat ng sariling tala-arawan or journal. I think it's out of context because the most essential learning competencies is more on answering questions, but it's not really on writing. The third is na ibabahagi sa iba ang mabubuting gawain karanasan sa pamamagitan ng tala-arawan. I think it's also not really related to the most essential learning competencies. What do you think? Would you agree to me?
Yes, sir.
No? Murag ko ano? So I think I'll be sharing how they should kuan it. I just got this from the net. How to improve it. Okay, this one. On the first layunin, objective, nasasagot ng mga katanungan sa nabasang journal o tala-arawan. Maybe you can have it nakikilala ang mga bahagi at layunin ng tala-arawan, journal o anekdota. I think it's more related to the learning competency. The second is on the skill na ipapaliwanag ang mga detalye mula sa binasang tala-arawan, journal or anekdota. It's more related. And then, naipapahayag ang kahalagahan ng pagbibigay ng tamang sagot sa mga katanungan mula sa nabasang tala-arawan, journal, or anekdota. I think this is much connected to the competency. So, the idea that I would like to share here is that when we are constructing objectives based on our competencies, it should be related. We need not to go beyond, no? And di na natukuha ang atong competency because wala nakakonect ang atong mga objectives. So I have here an example. So I made a lesson in grade 7. So the content standard is the learner demonstrates understanding of the key concepts of sets and the real number system. So I highlighted their understanding key concepts. And then the performance standard is the learner is able to formulate challenging situations involving sets and real numbers and solve this in a variety of strategies. And then I highlighted there formulate challenging situations and then solve variety of strategies. And the competency that I look into is the learner performs fundamental operations on integers. So how did I go about with the objectives? The knowledge objective that I have is determine the rules in adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing integers. The most essential understanding that the learner should have in this topic is the rules, no? On the adding, subtracting, and multiplying dividers to have correct answers. And then the second, supposed to be letter B, yung letter C. On the psychomotor is solve problems involving integer operations, but I placed there using variety of strategies because in our performance standards, it's really clear there that there should be a variety of strategies in solving problems. So you can make use of visual, multiple representations, no? You can represent it through numbers. You can represent it through illustrations also. If you want to solve integers, no? You can draw it or you can make use of other ways in solving it as long as you can get the correct answer. And also the psychomotor is appreciate the importance of integer operations in real lives by citing sample scenarios. No, there are sample scenarios that adding, subtracting, multiplying, and this dividing integers can come into, like if we go into the the bank, usually we withdraw, usually we deposit, something like that. It's also part of the integers, the positive and the negatives. With the learning objective that I have, what was I able to capture the standards and the competencies with these objectives? Maybe you can share a little of your comments and suggestions. Was the objective clear? Was it smart? Is it specific, measurable, attainable, result oriented, and time bounded? Maybe later in our discussion. So to continue, in the learning activities that I had, I would like to make use of the experiential learning approach. So it's more on the experiential learning. I think this is with goals, the 4 A's. So on the first thing that I will do is I'll give them activity. This is on face-to-face. This is an example on the face-to-face setup, because later we will try to go over with how to do it in the no in the flexible way, in the new normal way. So the activity is I will ask students to do integer operations using big and small stones. Can they add? Can they multiply? Can they divide? Can they subtract? Or can they add using so something like that? And in the analysis part, I'll be asking them questions. How was they able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide using stones? What are the things that they discover in adding, subtracting, multiplying? How did no? Basta ang idea is so that they can get the rules, no? Ma-determine nila ang mga rules out from the activity. And then in the abstraction part is the time that the teacher will discuss some examples in adding, multiplying, subtracting, and dividing, and then relate it to real life. So she can ask, in real situation, how is this possible? Or they can ask them to illustrate, integer addition, integer subtraction, integer multiplication, integer division in real life. And then the application that I have here is an integer DAMAT game. So I'll be asking the students to play a DAMAT game, and then they will be encountering those addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And then for the assessment task, I'll be asking them to craft 4 real-life inspired integer-related problems, one of each operation, and provide solutions using variety of strategies and ways. And then as a teacher, I'll be presenting them rubric to do that. So I think that's the example that I can give to ensure constructive alignment. And then we made use of an instructional model, the 4 A's. I also anchor it in a learning theory, the experiential learning theory. And then I also consider the real life situations. No, I also look into the content standards and the performance standards and the competencies that I should have, cognitive, behavioral, and psychomotor things there. Okay. Uh, can I still be heard so that I can continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sige, sige. I'm asking this from time to time, maybe because pasinawala ang connection na nagstorya ako din, no? Okay. So now, there are also these considerations that we need to look into the learner's profile. So we know that the learners have multiple intelligences and have different learning styles, that some are tactile, some are visual, some are kinesthetic. So we need to look into that, no? But now in the new normal, the learner's profile that we look into is if they have gadget, if they have internet connection, kana bago atong learner's profile, not really on the sa face to face. Atong learner's profile is the learner's style and multiple intelligences. But now our profiling will be more on the distance of their school, of their house from our school, because we do home visitation. their connectivity, if they have uh, naa ba sila cellphone, naa sila internet, naa sila laptop, something like that. So that's the thing that we have now in our learner's profile. The second is the 21st century skills. Later, I'll be talking about that. And then here's some add-on that I got from a training in PNU, the whole child approach as well as financial literacy. There is a need to incorporate whole child approach as of the moment because this is more on the needs of the learners. And then financial literacy, by the way, the whole child approach is anchored on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the financial literacy because of PISA, no? Program of International Student Assessment, because of the PISA, the financial literacy is also one of the things that we need to consider in constructing our lessons. So for the 21st century, we have 21st century learning skills. We have here critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. For the literacy skills that we need to develop, the information skill, the media skill, and the technology skill. For the life skills, the flexibility, leadership, initiative, productivity, and social skills. I think these are the things that we need to consider now in the new normal. We can look into that if in designing our lessons, we can capture some of these. Maybe not all, but some. No? And then for the whole child tenets, the child should be healthy and safe. That's why we are continuing the learning amidst the pandemic to ensure that the students are healthy and safe. But our lesson should also keep our students healthy and safe, no? So our lessons should not be threatening to them and make them engage also and make them supported, no? There are resources, we will be giving them resources. We may ask the parents to help them, and then it should be challenging, no? So that's the whole child tenets. Maybe we can look into this later in our lessons. So this is the question that we have now in mind. How can I design math lessons in the new normal? Kanino?